This week on Africa Update, world's longest-serving president Teodoro Obiang of Equatorial Guinea eyes the presidency for a sixth term as after 43 years in office. What is the motivation for sit-tight syndrome in Africa and its impact on governance? Also on the program, back to the roots, Senegalese promote fonio consumption in annual event to avert food crisis. Plus, Africa Update, where we highlight some of the bigger stories on the continent. This is Africa Update, reaching you from Abuja, Nigeria's capital. I am Ayuba Ilya. Welcome. Equatorial Guinea's President Teodoro Obiang is set to be re-elected for a sixth term in Africa's only Spanish-speaking country after 43 years. The 80-year-old president, who came to power in 1979 military coup, is the world's longest-serving head of state. Civil society groups observe that on election day, government representatives in villages and towns force voters to cast ballots for the ruling party. Obiang's government is accused of conducting widespread abuse of critics and using the country's oil to enrich the president and his family, one of whom is the vice president of the country. The plan to run for the sixth time has been criticized by civil society groups, opposition groups and lawyers, leading to more arrests. Here is what we know about Teodoro Obiang.
Teodoro Obiang Nguema Basogo is a former military officer who has served as the second president of Equatorial Guinea since August 1979. Obiang was born in the town of Akokan in the Mongumu district in former Spanish Guinea on June 5, 1942. His family is of the Esongui clan and his name is derived from the Fang people naming customs. Both of his parents originate from Gabon. After the death of Mbasogo, Obiang and his 9 brothers were raised by their father and his new wife, Carmen Mekwe Mbira. Obiang attended Cardinal Cisneros School Group in Ebibin, Equatorial Guinea in his youth and obtained a degree in labor administration from the La Salle Center in Bata, now Enrique Mvo Okenwe National College. Obiang joined the Colonial Guard and attended the General Military Academy located at Zaragoza, Spain, where he achieved the rank of lieutenant. He worked as a leader of the National Guard, governor of the province of Bioko, and head of the notorious Black Beach prison. The first president of Equatorial Guinea, Francisco Marcla Nguema, was Obiang's uncle. After Marclas ordered the murders of several family members, Obiang overthrew his uncle in a bloody coup d'etat in August 1979. Messiah Marclas was placed on trial, sentenced to death, and executed by firing squad. As the only candidate allowed to run for the presidency, Obiang was elected initially to serve a 7-year term. He held the position of the 9th chairperson of the African Union from 2011 to 2012. As president, Obiang holds all governing power in the nation and presides over an authoritarian regime. Under his authority, Equatorial Guinea has become a major oil supplier to the United States, and due to collecting several $100 million in revenues annually from U.S. oil companies, the country has one of the highest per capita incomes in Africa. Obiang, however, has been accused of unlawful killings by his security forces, government-sanctioned kidnappings, systematic torture of prisoners, and many other cases of abuse. To this date, however, no opposition has stepped forward to attempt to overthrow the president. Forbes magazine has listed Obiang as one of the wealthiest heads of state in Africa, with a net worth of close to $700 million. Obiang is currently married to Constancia Mangwe, and he reportedly favors his son Teodoro Nguema to succeed him as president.
Now, the African continent is not new to the sit-tight rule syndrome, as several names of African leaders could be said to be synonymous to dictatorship whenever it's mentioned. Names such as, the Denis Sassou of the Congo-Brazzaville, who has been president for 37 years. You also have Paul Biya, who is also arguably considered as the oldest, when put together his years as Prime Minister of Cameroon. And also you have Yoweri Museveni, who has been president for 36 years in Uganda. And also you also have Isaias Afwerki, who has been president for 31 years in his country, Eritrea, and also Jose Eduardo being president for 38 years in Angola. And then, of course, the late Idris Deby, who was president for at least 30 years before he died in Chad. Now his son is the president of the Chad Republic. So you could see that Africa is not new to this trend. We'll take a look at this issue much deeper with my guest after this break. All right, now joining me to talk about this is a journalist, writer, and academic, Sadiq Abba, who joins me virtually from Paris, France. All right, so would you consider the re-election of Teodoro Obiang of the Equatorial Guinea as a victory for the people of Equatorial Guinea?
43 years on power. This is not a victory. Maybe he is a victory for himself, but it's not the victory of his people, because people of Guinea love to change, to have a new management, a new leadership. But if the president keep on stay for 43 years, I don't think that is can consider as a victory.
All right. Now, is there a question about the legality or the legitimacy of the re-election of Teodoro, since the laws of the country, seem to give him that latitude?
The country, the constitution of Guinea Equatorial allow him to keep as he wants for a life in the president. But it's the legality is not legitimate, because if you consider the legality, he have a right to stay on power, to have a new mandate. But if you look the aspect on legitimacy, which is ethic aspect, is there someone who can stay at the power for 33 years? He's not the only one, Guinea Equatorial. There is another part who can lead after. You say, if you want to build a country, you give your contribution for 10, for 15 years if you want. And another leader can come to the power and give his contribution. But in the case of Guinea Equatorial, only one man stay on the power for 43 years. I don't know if we can say that is legitimate. It's legal, but it's not legitimate.
Okay. Now, what, in your opinion, is the motivation for this kind of behavior, the sit-tight syndrome on the African continent?
Conception of politics in Africa, our engagement in politics. More of our leader as coming not to serve people, but to serve themselves. If we don't move from this kind of consideration, we take the power for our advantage, not for serving people. If we don't change this kind of consideration, we will not going in democracy. We will not going for build Africa. We will not going for build our country. I think that we need a new leader generation in Africa, as like the President Buhari do. He do 2 terms of his mandate. He is going in February. He is going to leave the place for another Nigeria. We need this kind of consideration, with kind of leadership for all Africa, not for Nigeria, not for Ghana. For all Africa, we need that kind of leadership, that kind of people who were going to serve people before serving themselves.
Now, if you look at a regional body like the African Union, for instance, they seem not to be, have much of a problem with this. I mean, some few years ago, we saw that Teodoro Obiang was, the chairperson of the AU. So at that level, is the AU doing anything to check this?
Change the mechanism of AU. Even if you don't have democracy in your country, even if you have no liberty in your country, when your turn, the turn of your side arrive, you take the African Union presidents. As you know, that it was the turn of Central Africa, and Central Africa decide to give the place to Teodoro Emega. I think we have to change. If we need African Union to give example, a good example of leadership, a good example of management. If you cannot Teodoro Emega as the president of African Union, he cannot say to Muhammad, he cannot say to Goita, to Assimi Goita, he cannot say to Doumbia, you are not Democrat, you are not coming off the board by election. If you don't give the example, in this case, I think African Union have to change. It's not, instead of being a syndicate of European Union with ethic, with example, if we don't do this, African Union will lose its credibility against people of Africa, and young, especially, they are not going to consider African Union as a good example. But we have to change. We have to build Africa. We have to build a leadership, a new leadership. We need that for going in progress in Africa.
There are those who would say that, well, this is not all bad. After all, we have seen countries like China, we have seen countries like Russia, have leaders that have been there for decades, and, no one seemed to be, bothered, and the country seemed to be doing, well. So why is it different with ours?
In Africa, if you are a country like Mali, like Chad, you need help, outside help. If you need outside help, you have to listen what outside is saying for you. China, if you go to China, you see China is not, you cannot compare China in state of development. Something was done. In Russia, something was done on development. We need leadership. We need people who is going to do democracy, to listen to the people for build Africa. They say you reduce it to China and you reduce it to Russia, but people are saying, if you compare to Arab country like Saudi Arabia or like Dubai, the people have money outside. But if you go there, you see something done. In our case, nothing done. In our case, we need help from outside. We have to build you have to listen what outside is saying. If you want to do, if you take progress, if you do what we need for our people, a minimum for the people, we can say like Angela Merkel, who has 3 terms, who spent more than 16 years at the power. But in this case, the comparison is not right, because it was very democratic, and something was the inside of development was done in Germany, was done in Russia, was done in China. It's not the case of Africa. I think people who don't want to build democracy, who don't want to build election, take this advantage saying, we are not allowed in China, in other country, there's no democracy. We can live in. This is not my opinion. I think if you are fighting for right and democracy in Africa, you cannot accept this kind of argument.
All right. So, in what ways would you say that this is impacting on issue of governance on the continent, the sit-tight syndrome?
Issue. If you look in many cases of our country, we have resources, we have money, but the leadership is weakness. We need if we have leadership, we have all to. We have the youngest people in the world. We have the most resources in the world. We have the most land for agriculture in the world. But our result was very bad because of leadership. We haven't a good leadership. If we get a good leadership, we can build a new Africa, the big Africa, and people will come in Africa. Instead of seeing people going outside in Mediterranean Sea, in or you know, in Morocco and the border with Morocco and Spain. If all are Africa, because all you want to leave Africa. If we build a leadership with our resources, people will come in. It will change. People will come in Africa, not African going outside for other countries.
All right. So how can Africans actually liberate themselves from this kind of trend? I mean, this is something that has been with us for decades. We've seen several. Some of them have died, some are still alive, and some are still coming up. So if you take a look at Chad, for instance, Idriss Deby, who is now late, his son is now the president of Chad, and there's every likelihood that he's going to contest for election after the transition period in that country. So it doesn't look like it's a trend that is going to end anytime soon. How can Africans liberate themselves?
The change is coming. It's not very, it's coming slowly. It's not very quickly, but the change is coming. If you take a country like Ghana, country like Nigeria, they have now a tradition of 2 terms, the tradition of election, we have to fight. We have to continue to fight. If we resign, saying that is not going to change, they try to change, but they have to continue to fight. Even if people was killed in Chad, more than 50 people was killed, but people have continued to fight, and they need the support of the strong support from outside, from other Africans. We have intellectual, we as a writer, we as artists, we have to continue to fight for the democracy in Africa, because only democracy can liberate Africa, and only democracy can give Africa the opportunity to build something new, to have economic development, to have industrialization, to have scientists, to have other things. Only democracy, and we have to continue to fight to give our life for building a new Africa, new leadership, and new democracy in Africa.
So can we really achieve this by electoral means, or by what means will this liberation come really? Is it by advocacy? Can it ever be peaceful?
Very strong civil society, and we have to continue to advocate, to sensibilize our partners outside. If you take the partners, they are very sensitive, or the democracy, they are very sensitive. But if you tell some other persons, they are not running. In the case of Chad, we know that the France is supporting the Idriss Deby family, and because French have interest. But we have to continue to advocate them. Their interest is to help Africa to become better, to help Africa to build a democracy. Because if Africa become more democratic, because they will win more with us, more than what they win actually. You have to continue. For me, it's the mix: the internal effort, the external effort, the advocacy. And my hope is that if you see now we have new African generation, they are not going to support the generation of Facebook, the generation of Twitter, the generation of Instagram. They are not going to accept what we and other old men accept in Africa. They will have to fight. And my hope is that because they are correct of the rest of what, they are not going to accept the Africa stay in dark. They are not going. They will have Africa who is in light, who can compete with other parts of the world.
You talk about foreign partners, and there are those who have argued that these foreign partners and foreign allies, can they really be trusted in terms of enshrining democracy on the continent? There are those who said that, look, their motives are not completely altruistic, So what kind of partnership and what role is the international community supposed to be playing here?
No, as you know, if you look what happened, what is ongoing in Africa, many partners are not interested by the democracy in Africa, by not interested with Africa good governance in country. They are interested. We have to know that We have some debate now in Sahel area. We need to replace France by Russia, or to replace France by Turkey. New partners. All partners are not philanthropic. They come for their interest. We as African, we as a country of Africa, we have to know that. We have to integrate that in our strategy. To integrate in our strategy and fight to have a right partnership. Now, the partnership in most of cases is not in win-win. The partnership are win and loss. We lost. We as Africa country, we as Africa, we lost. We have to build a new partnership which is taking the advantage, and this is not coming. It's coming when in democracy, when the leader are looking for the interest of the country, not the leader of the interest or the interest or the leader of outside.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us on Africa Update. Sadiq Abba, who is a journalist, writer, and academic. Thank you for your perspectives on the program. Well, this is Africa Update, reaching you from Abuja, Nigeria's capital. After the break, we'll go back to the roots as environmentalist promotes consumption of an ancient African grain, fonio. Join us again. All right, thanks for staying. Now, fonio, also known as acha iburara, or hungry rice in some places, is an African grain that's considered the continent's oldest cultivated cereal. Native to West Africa, it's a staple most enjoyed in the mountainous areas of countries like Burkina Faso, Guinea, Senegal, Mali, and Nigeria. In this report, Senegalese environmentalists are promoting increased usage of locally grown grains such as fonio, which thrives in dry conditions, as a means of tackling food security, reliance on grain imports, and climate change. Take a look.
Senegal's Kédougou region celebrates its annual Day of Fonio, a grain native to West Africa that's packed with nutrients like protein and amino acids. The region, on the border with Guinea and Mali, has become known as Senegal's Fonio hub.
The goal of this day is to raise awareness about the benefits of fonio and to encourage Senegalese people to adapt it into their diets.
Fonio is gluten-free, rich in iron, and grows easily without pesticides or chemical fertilizers. Most importantly, the grain is drought-resistant and thrives in poor soils.
Fonio isn't impacted by climate variations. We're never scared of drought or floods. We can always count on fonio. We always have a good harvest.
Food insecurity looms large in West Africa, where climate change is blamed for weather extremes that challenge food production. The need for tough local crops like fonio is at an all-time high. The COVID pandemic and Russia's war on Ukraine exposed the region's dependence on food imports like rice and wheat.
Now is the time to start thinking about how to stock up on reserves, for Africa and particularly for Senegal. Because if we don't, in 1 or 2 decades, I assure you that famine will destroy all of Africa.
Fonio production has been held back by the tiring shilling process, usually done by hand. Dehulling machines donated by the U.S. African Development Foundation have benefited Senegal's Kédougou region.
With the machine, we can process 150 kilos per hour, whereas manually, we can't even process 10 kilos per hour.
But other regions aren't so lucky. Senegal produced about 5,000 tons of fonio in 2019, compared to more than 500,000 tons in neighboring Guinea. Fonio fans in Senegal hope leaders prioritize the grain's production for food security and so it can reach its full potential.
All right, now let's take a look at Roundup Africa, highlighting some of the biggest stories on the continent. Kenyan President William Ruto on Monday said that the East African Community troops deployed in the Democratic Republic of Congo would enforce peace, not keep it, in an apparent clarification on the mandate of the East African Community Regional Force. Dr. Ruto suggests that the new mission departs from the traditional peacekeepers by ensuring those who don't comply are dealt with.
We are committed under the East Africa community to do whatever it takes to support His Excellency the President, to support the government of DRC and the people of DRC so that we can have peace in this country. It is in our interest, collectively and individually, that we have a peaceful region.
Now, in the meantime, Uganda says it will be sending over 1,000 troops to the Democratic Republic of Congo as part of an East African community force tasked with ending decades of instability in the troubled North Kivu region. Kenya and Burundi have already sent soldiers to the eastern province to take part in the regional force. People from all walks of life are signing up to join Burkina Faso's new volunteer program in Ouagadougou. The nation, grappling with insurgency, which has continually extended its deadly grip, called for civilian backup in October. Burkina Faso launched a drive to recruit 50,000 civilian defense volunteers. Among them, volunteers for the defense of the homeland. The men and women are on a mission to protect the people and property of their localities of origin alongside the defense and security forces. German government said that it plans to wind down the country's participation in a UN military mission in Mali by the middle of 2024. Tensions have grown between Mali, its African neighbors, and the West after Mali's government allowed Russian mercenaries from the Wagner Group to deploy on its territory. Chancellor Olaf Scholz's spokesman, Stefan Hasbestred, had said in a brief statement that the government will propose to Parliament granting a final one-year extension to the mission in Mali in May to allow this deployment to be phased out in a structured way after 10 years. The current mandate for Germany's participation in the UN mission known as MINUSMA allows for the deployment of up to 1,400 troops. Britain announced last week that it will withdraw its troops from the UN mission in Mali, saying that the West African country's growing reliance on Russian mercenaries is undermining stability. Meanwhile, the Malian junta has announced that it will ban the activities of all non-governmental organizations financed or supported by France, including those operating in the humanitarian field. This decision is likely to affect many NGOs that France has continued to support despite the abrupt deterioration in relations between the two countries for more than a year. The interim Prime Minister, Colonel Abdoulaye Maïga, justified the decision in a statement posted on social networks by recent announcement by France that it had suspended its official deployment assistance to Mali. And finally, Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari unveiled the redesigned 200, 500 and 1,000 naira notes as proposed by the Central Bank of Nigeria. The unveiling marks the first time in 19 years Nigeria will be redesigning its currency note. At a briefing after the ceremony before the Federal Executive Council meeting, the CBN governor debunked insinuations suggesting that the early unveiling of the new notes is a means to target some Nigerians. And that's a wrap on Africa Update for this week. Join us next time on the program. Don't forget, you can always watch more via all our social media platforms and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Bye for now. My name is Ayuba Ilya. Thanks for watching.